Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me today. I'm still working on this huge Peter Thiel file, and all these people are on some sort of drug. So I thought, well, let me just separate out the drugs they're taking into today's show. And also, I have some pretty startling information about dementia. Yeah, coming for everybody. But before I get started, they're looking to do RFK Jr. is doing a clean sweep of the CDC. What does all this mean? He's saying that he's getting rid of all these people, the CDC, getting rid of all these vaccines. Maybe they're not going to need all this stuff because they have their silent war going on right now, right? They maybe not need to give us vaccines if they're giving us injections into our homes, right? It looks awful suspicious this week. It looks like Trump is wearing a catheter, since we're on the subject of their health. Yeah, it looks like he's wearing a catheter, and people interject that he's also wearing diapers, so he has quite a smell about him. So let's get started. Trump was talking this week. He made this saying, he said, when they spit, we hit, meaning that if you spit at the cops or the military, they're going to hit back, right? Well, how they hit back is how all cowards hit back is, around these different protest sites and stuff. They happen to leave bricks there and stuff. Oh, in case you want to have some bricks to throw through some windows. Oh, here they are. And then we have the elites over there doing this No Kings protest. Pretty funny since we never left the UK. We are, in fact, British subjects under the UK. So it's pretty funny that all the elites are going out and saying, well, we never voted for a king. Trump can't be the king. We're a democracy. Well, actually, none of that is true. So if you think these elites are telling you the truth, you'd be mistaken. They're all joining together. That creepy Midas Touch group that has like almost 5 million subscribers. Yeah, creeps, a bunch of lawyers. Yeah, we're going to this big activist thing. We're going to show the establishment what we want to have. Yeah, right. I think they're all kind of lying, right? Any of them mention any of this stuff about what's coming ahead? Let me think for a minute. I don't think so. It's pretty funny this week, though, because Trump suggested that Greta Thunberg, they're pulling out all the stops. They even had that little liar pull up in Israel. Yeah, they got her going on. They got people yapping about the Epstein files going on. Everything to deflect from the huge amount of debt the U.S. is in, and the inflation. Just don't want to talk about these things, right? So he said that Greta Thunberg needs to attend anger management. I think they all need to attend something. But before I get started, do you realize this is so huge? This is going to be about today's show. It looks like close to 50% of the population is planning on getting dementia. Yeah, that is really huge. Because I did a show recently about smoking. They lied about the impact of smoking, so they cover up the lung cancer, right? People are getting more lung cancer and smoking is down. Why is that? Well, because of all this nuclear surrounding us, right? So right now it's becoming obvious to some because smoking is way down, but lung cancer is way up. So what is going on with this dementia? Well, it's huge because it's another indicator of how we're being poisoned in our homes. It does not matter if someone has a smart meter or not. Everyone is getting hit. If there's a smart meter involved, it just makes it worse. If we step back and think about it, this is a silent war. They want to get rid of our DNA while they're gathering up souls. They want to do something, and actually this part is actually, I think, quite brilliant in an evil genius kind of way. What a way to get rid of the enemy. Now, around 40 or 50% of us, yes, and I looked over these numbers over and over and over again, and that is the correct number. Anticipation of over 40 to 50% of us will lose our minds with dementia. This is a huge discovery I'm telling you about here. So what they're saying, lifelong dementia risk for someone age 55 has climbed from low teens or less in the mid 20th century to 42% today. And I have all this data. Some says, oh, it's not an issue. This isn't climbing. Well, this is like smoking to hide the ball, right? Dementia cases will, in fact, rise in every country, with the smallest estimated increase in high income, Asia Pacific, 53%. Western Europe, 74%. And the largest target growth in North Africa and the Middle East at 367%. That's 367% increase. So population growth and population aging, they say, are the main reasons behind this large rise in global dementia cases. I smell a rat. That is not true. They're just saying, oh, because we're getting older, we're getting dementia. Not true. And it's also very confusing. What's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? Well, dementia is the word for a group of symptoms caused by disorders that affect the brain. Dementia is also not a specific disease. Dementia affects the ability to remember how to execute certain daily tasks. So what's Alzheimer's? See, here again, if they confuse the words enough, they confuse most people, right? Just like the word psychopath, they had to confuse that word so we wouldn't get on to who they are, right? Alzheimer's, it's a progressive degenerate disorder that attacks the brains, nerve cells, and neurons. Alzheimer's also results in loss of memory, thinking, and language skills. Alzheimer's often results in behavioral changes. So pick a word, right? Pick a word. So they have the words pretty well confused, but I think what we're looking at here is, in fact, Alzheimer's. There's been pockets of people in this country getting diseases like Alzheimer's, and these areas are getting hit, and the people are all getting, I think it was Alzheimer's. Yeah. And the people who weren't getting sick were the people who were smoking. And so let's look at the disease chart they're anticipating. What is the number one disease over all of them? Dementia and Alzheimer's. Number 2, heart disease. Number 3, lung cancer. Number 4, strokes. Number 5, respiratory diseases. Number 6, bowel cancer. Reading all these kids getting bowel cancer these days. Number 7, flu and pneumonia. Number 8, ill-defined conditions. Number 9, blood cancer. And the top 10 is prostate cancer. So it looks like, to me at least, I can look at this list and I can see that a lot of these diseases, like the dementia and Alzheimer's, see how they keep putting dementia in there even though it really doesn't mean anything, right? I think it's just a kind of confusing thing. So it has now overtaken heart disease. So this is all from the air that we're breathing, right? Heart disease, you breathe into your lungs, right? Lung cancer, strokes, your body can't take it after a while and you have a stroke. Respiratory diseases, here again, breathing it in. Bowel cancer, breathing it into your bowels, right? Ill-defined conditions and blood cancer and prostate cancer. Gee, sounds to me like this list is looking more and more like radiation, like nuclear that's in our homes. I dug up every little study that I could find, all of them, and not much to look at, but several EMF studies suggest that exposure can lead to a breakdown of the blood-brain barrier, or the BBB. And full disclosure, that's what's going on with me right now. It breached my blood-brain barrier. The radiation did a while back. So I've been struggling with onset of dementia. And I was confused about the words because Parkinson, it affects your brain, how you work. First things that I noticed was this: when I would go to cut vegetables and stuff, my hands act really funny, like not like they're shaking or anything, but I would chop vegetables in a weird way that I never chopped vegetables in my entire life. So yeah, I started noticing that my hand to mind issues have kind of been compromised a little bit. But I've been working very hard against all this by doing a mindful sleeping, proper diet, and all that. But let me keep reading here. So these studies on rats have found, and they also, I talked about this ages ago, there was one study the military did that they knew that microwave cut off our breathing. Okay, so they've known all this stuff for a long time. So let's get back to this BBB, the blood-brain barrier. This disruption may allow harmful substances, including toxins and proteins such as beta amyloids, to enter the brain more freely. The accumulation of beta amyloid in brain tissue is a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease and may be exacerbated by compromised BBB or blood-brain barrier breaching. So, yeah, once you breach your blood-brain, you're on your way to crazy town, right? So, actually, I'm laughing about it, but you have to kind of step back on some of these things, right? It's actually pretty hilarious that they found something so simple, right? Plutonium. They can pump into our homes, create this dirty electricity to pump in there, and give over half of us dementia or Alzheimer's, so we won't really remember what they did to us. I mean, you got to kind of laugh at a little bit of this stuff, right? So I actually looked up some of these studies, and here is one. One was rats were exposed to microwaves continuously in pulse for 2 hours. They found that leakage of albumin into brain tissue, a clear sign of BBB disruption. Result: 56 of 184 exposed rats showed albumin leakage versus 5 of 62 in the control group. And I have all of these studies down below, and I have them all on my website, so you can look up all of this stuff for yourself. All I could find were these rat studies. So there was another one, a Raymond study, and it studied male and female. It also matters when they do these research things. It matters what kind of rats they use. So they did a study using male and female, they call them white star rats, and they were exposed to these stuff 20 minutes under anesthesia. And only male rats showed significant albumin BBB leakage, no effect in females. Then there was another study called Ebhart in 2007 that studied GSM 900 mobile phone radiation exposure. And it found that persistent albumin exacerbation both immediately and 7 days after a 2-hour exposure. Effects even seen at low power. So using a low-powered mobile phone, the radiation exposure, pretty bad. There was a electromagnetic pulse EMP study, and that exposed Sprague Dowley rats exposed to pulses of EMF, and it led to cognitive impairment, oxidative stress, and increased beta amyloid formation. So there was another study in 2020. Rats were exposed to broad spectrum EM pulses. It increased the BBB permeability was noted. Tight junction protein expression and other markers were altered. So there was another review of the EMF effects on BBB in 2010, and that finding was this: BBB permeability increases only when tissue is heated. Evidence for non-thermal RF effects remained inconclusive or mixed. And there was a connection to beta amyloids and Alzheimer's. EMP exposure not only disrupts the BBB, but also elevates the precursors and proteins. Once BBB integrity is compromised, beta amyloid central to Alzheimer's pathology may more easily accumulate in brain tissue. So isn't that interesting? They found this going on in rats, yet nobody bothered to find out what's going on with people, right? That's when they said, stop the studies, we're exposing too much. So yeah, it's pretty good reason why they want to stop the studies, right? Not move into human studies. So now let's get this straight. We now have smart meters, we now have phones in everybody's hands. We have kids literally living on iPads, sleeping with them, in the rooms with them. And all of this is spewing out dirty electricity into our home. And how it does it is by the BBB disruption and the oxidative stress and the neural inflammation. So the BBB disruption, it's repeated EMF exposure, especially in higher or pulse frequencies, has been shown in animal studies to compromise the blood-brain barrier. This could allow beta amyloid toxins and inflammatory agents to enter the brain. So yeah, they did studies on both EMF and dirty electricity suggest they can generate reactive oxygen species, or ROS, in brain tissue, contributing to neurodegeneration. I think we're starting to get the picture here, right? Being around all this electronic stuff, locked inside of homes with all this formaldehyde and stuff, not a good picture. The circadian disruption and melatonin suppression. EMFs, including those from smart meters, may interfere with melatonin, an important antioxidant that protects neurons and regulates sleep. And also, do yourself a favor, get out in the sun and do not wear sunglasses. Get connected with the sun. So let's talk about this electrohypersensitivity, or EHS, because though controversial, some individuals report memory loss, confusion, and brain fog in proximity to smart meters or high DE environments. These symptoms are consistent with cognitive decliner marks. So yeah, some people are just more sensitive than other people. Why do we have so many people in this country with so much anxiety, so much disease, and all that? It's coming from inside our homes. So I did a big sweep about what other countries, and do countries with smart meters show more dementia? Well, not conclusively proven, but correlations are being observed. So yeah, high smart meter and Wi-Fi saturation countries, which would be USA, UK, parts of Europe, Australia, also report rising early onset dementia. There's also this thing going on with children. Children getting dementia. Yeah, everybody's getting it, right? But they also then say, well, these same countries also have older populations. They have more screening. They have better reporting systems. So while correlation exists, causation has not been proven. Well, of course, because they've only been studying on a few rats, right? So this is about omission, right? They obviously left a big, huge part of this equation out of the picture. They did not study people. They've only looked at rats. And in looking at rats, it's not looking very good. So what is the rollout? Well, so far, the USA has 80% of the homes here have smart meters. So the UK only has 50% rollout. So yeah, we're already getting the Alzheimer's here and all that. India has low rollout, but they also have lower dementia. Rural Africa has minimal tech, and they also have lower EMF. People aren't going as crazy, right? They need more studies. They need controlled human or animal studies using simulated dirty electricity conditions. They need more research on the cumulative lifetime exposure to dirty electricity and the onset early of Alzheimer's. Of course, none of that is being done. That is the plan, not the bug in the plan, right? Bury the real facts. So the biological mechanism for a link exists and are plausible, but dirty electricity and smart meters could plausibly exacerbate Alzheimer's risk, especially in vulnerable populations. But direct proof is lacking. This is a field that urgently needs independent studies. Well, of course, they're not being funded. I'm going to put this on hold for a second here. Okay, I'm back. And then I also have listed down below a bunch of other studies they supposedly took, and they say, well, age-specific incidents are declining. They did a study in 2000 to 2016. A U.S. study found dementia prevalence dropped from 11.5% in 2000 to 7.7 in 2016, a 3% annual decline. So they also did this study called the Framingham Heart Study that spanned from 1970s to 2010. It found a 44% drop in a 5-year dementia incident, especially those with at least a high school diploma. Pretty startling, right? So I just read you all these rat studies, and they said that, well, the rats are all getting dementia, right? Well, they did it's called a health and retirement study. Now, anybody can do studies, right? And in order to figure out if this study is any good, I also have links there for you to take a look for yourself because, you have to look at what kind of rats they used in the study, how long the study went for, most importantly, who was funding the study. So obviously, this Framingham Heart Study found that, hey, everything's looking okay. So they can get whatever results they're looking at, right? Just like they want people to still think that smoking is going to give you lung cancer, right? So, but then I find this other thing that says total cases are rising rapidly. Despite lower age-specific rates, total dementia cases continue climbing due to the aging U.S. population. In 2020, about 7 million Americans aged 65 plus had dementia. That's projected to surpass 9 million by 2030 and approach 12 million by 2040. So, anyway, so yeah, you can really take a look and see, well, one study says it's really rising, right? And mortality rates and death certificates. Dementia mortality rose sharply. Deaths linked to dementia tripled from 150,000 in 1999 to over 450,000 in 2020. Part of this increase stems from improved diagnosis and more thorough death certificate attribution. Well, maybe, maybe not. I have read that things like statins, those drugs they have everybody on for their heart and blood pressure, that can cause a rise in dementia. There are a lot of factors that will increase dementia, but I'm here to argue I am pretty well convinced that the main source is coming from inside our home. So they say that the decline in smoke. See, none of this stuff makes sense, right? So lifetime risk of dementia after 55 in the U.S. is now estimated at 42%, up from previous estimates. That is pretty huge, right? That people are going to be getting dementia pretty quickly. So, yeah, and I have, like I said, I've got all the numbers on the show notes down below. Now, another reason they're not diagnosing people with dementia is because doctors likely are looking at these tests and thinking, yeah, dementia, not such a big deal, right? And remember, doctors are not your best friend. So I suggest that you take a look for yourself, because how do you get somebody who's losing their mind to tell you that they're losing their mind, right? I know with me, it's been going on for quite a long time now. There's certain things in the last couple of years when it started getting breached that I can no longer do effectively. Like, for example, it's hard for me to go through one of my files and organize it. And what I'm trying to do now is go through all of my files that have the most alarming or the worst case of death and just focus on those shows. But it's almost like I'm looking at a whole new thing, because I have extensive files on everything, but when I go to look at a file, it'll be like, oh yeah, hey, this is all new, right? So how do you really know when somebody starts losing their mind unless they're really paying attention. I happen to have been paying attention because I know this is going on, right? But what about all the people that just start brushing things off? Well, you're getting older, you're starting to forget things. So, how long down the road into dementia do people go before anybody notices it? And also down here somewhere, I have a thing. They've also cut back on doctors that understand dementia, so it's going to be kind of a big deal in the future, right? Um, so yeah, you'll find things that are saying that young cohorts now develop dementia later in life than previous generations. Yeah, you'll find, and I have them all for you to take a look at. Basically, you're going to have to decide, do you believe these studies that are making rats do all these things? And do you believe that this could also happen to people? Well, then I suggest that you understand these studies better yourself. Take a look at it because they're all over the place. They say the US currently has similar or slightly higher age-related dementia rates compared to other developed nations. Well, could that be because we now have 80% of our homes have smart meters? Well, of course that could be a factor, right? And then they go on to say, while individual risk is declining due to public health improvements, not true at all. The total number of cases continues to grow owing to demographic aging. Japan leads in per capita prevalence. Other wealthy regions closely track the United States. Greater economic inequality in the U.S. amplifies dementia risk compared to countries with more social support. Yeah, people here don't have health insurance and stuff, people at the bottom rungs of society. So, how are they going to figure out that they're getting dementia? Probably not going to figure it out, right? Well, they're just kind of old and forgetful. Don't worry about it, Grandma. She used to be a little bit sharper, but she's not quite so sharp. Because, kids, it's all that happens when you age. You're just bound to lose your mind, right? So yeah, I have everything you ever want to look for, because they did a study in over time, 1988 to 2015, and they found that the U.S. saw a 13% reduction per decade. So, and then another 2025 study across the US, UK, and Europe confirms younger generations have lower dementia prevalence at similar ages compared to older cohorts. Absolutely not true. I think they're just assuming that people that are old are going to get this, and they're not factoring in the fact that young people, including kids, are getting dementia. Because how do you know? You think, oh, just a crazy kid, can't remember anything, right? So what's the projections? Well, they say that 21 million people living with dementia projected to reach 32 million by 2040. In the United States, around 5 million Americans currently living with Alzheimer's that they know about, right? So, global burden, dementia worldwide doubled from 20 million in 1990 to 52 million in 2019, with high income regions at the top. So, the U.S. age-adjusted dementia rates are comparable to or slightly higher than peer countries like the UK, Canada, and Australia, but notably below Japan and Italy. Why is that? I don't know. So they say the U.S. faces a serious dementia burden on par with other aging affluent nations. So yeah, it's not declining. They say that it is, right? I did a global snapshot and it said as of 2020, 55 million people that they know of worldwide lived with dementia. Over 60%. It's expected to rise to 70% by 2050. Every year, there are 10 million new cases globally, about one every second. And here again, that they know of, right? So anyway, so I would suggest that you just take a look. I don't think you're probably going to get dementia unless you're sitting in your home like we all are. So everybody is really at risk, right? So they did a study. Let me see. Yeah, the risk of dementia is much higher than experts thought. The lifetime risk of dementia after age 55 is double the previous estimates, new research shows. Well, that's looking pretty alarming if you ask me, but I can't sort out all their research issues. I'm just here to talk about their personalities, right? These psychopaths have decided that killing us quietly in our homes is the next plan, right? So, yeah, we could out survey ourselves to pieces, but I think in general, the numbers are showing. So, they say that we've seen steady reductions in both dementia prevalence and incidence across 2000 to 2016. Despite that, total dementia cases continue to increase due to population aging. See, you notice the buzzwords here. They want to push this all off that it's just old people getting this, right? Well, how do they know what young people are getting it if nobody is studying, right? They're not studying anything, so they don't know if kids are getting it. I saw something years ago about childhood dementia is now a thing. So, yeah, they can say what they want. Here's what they say. What we need is more education. Yeah, we need more education, that's for sure. Better heart health, less smoking, improved hypertension management. No, we don't need all that. Possibly improved brain health and cognitive reserve. Yes, we should start to be aware our bodies are fine electrical tuned machines. We never should have been locked up inside a home, pumped full of electricity, and now pumping in all this dirty electricity. That is why we're being killed, right? So, and the US population is aging rapidly. In the year 2000, 35 million Americans were age 65 plus. In 2024, it's now 62 million Americans are 65 plus. Even if fewer per 100 people get dementia, the total number of elderly people has grown so much that the absolute number of cases keeps rising. So, Alzheimer deaths supposedly tripled from 1999 to 2020, partly due to aging, partly due to better recognition. Funny thing, they didn't teach doctors about nutrition. I guess they also didn't bother to teach doctors about aging, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I think this number is true. 42% of people who live past 55 may develop dementia. I think that some studies show dementia is being diagnosed earlier in some groups. Veterans, people with TBI, certain racial groups, new risk groups. Research now includes obesity, pollution, trauma, PTSD, and diabetes, all rising in modern populations. Hey, why don't we just do a study about the dirty electricity? Oh, wait a minute. Let's study everything else but that, right? So, because they keep pushing this thing, the total population is older, so there are more total cases. But new methods suggest more people over a lifetime may develop it than previously estimated. So, Alzheimer's, a neurodegenerative disorder characterized by the accumulation of amyloid beta plaques and tau tangles in the brain, leading to neuronal loss, brain atrophy, and cognitive decline. Key features: memory loss, especially short-term memory, is your early symptoms. Disorientation, confusion about time and place. language problems, trouble finding words, poor judgment and decision making, personality changes and mood swings. Eventually requires full-time care. So, uh, and also, your brain starts to shrink. I think that if you keep your brain active, you're probably not going to get as big of a decline as people who get older and basically just sit in the chair, right? So, I think that by the time you get to all these symptoms, you're not remembering them, right? So you're not remembering how confused you were. So, um, and I think we should stay away from this dementia. Dementia is a general term for a decline in cognitive ability severe enough to interfere with daily life. It is not a specific disease, but a syndrome, a set of symptoms that affect memory, reasoning, language, judgment, and behavior. So, let me see here. I'm going to scroll down here. There's no reason to, and I was looking to see if there's any links that anybody has found between dirty electricity and dementia. And of course, there is no definitive mainstream scientific consensus linking dirty electricity directly to Alzheimer's or dementia. But some independent researchers and alternative health scientists propose that brain inflammation may be triggered by prolonged exposure to certain EMF frequencies. Mitochondrial dysfunction and oxidative stress caused by EMFs could impair cognitive function. Some case studies and ecological studies suggest correlation between high EMF areas and increased dementia or neurological disorders, but these are not causal. So there were 3 different studies here about this dirty electricity. One called Havas and Olstad in 2008. They found that filtering dirty electricity in schools led to improvement in behavior and cognitive ability in children. It was controversial and small scale. There was another one, the Bio-Innovative Report, 2007 to 2020 update. A compendium of studies arguing that lower level EMF exposure is linked to neurological and other health effects. It is not peer-reviewed in the traditional sense, but widely cited by concerned advocacy groups. Swiss, Israeli, and Iranian studies have shown some biological responses. For example, increased blood-brain barrier permeability to EMFs, which may contribute to cognitive effects over time. So what do the big ones say? Well, who are you going to call? The NIH and the CDC show no clear evidence to support that low-level EMFs or dirty electricity cause dementia. They can't say that because they haven't done any studies, right? The International Agency for Research on Cancer, or the IARC, that they classify EMFs as a group 2B carcinogen, possibly carcinogenic, meaning there is limited evidence in humans. They focus more on heat effects from phones, not low-frequency power line transients. Some people report EMF hypersensitivity with symptoms like memory issues, confusion, and headaches, but these are not officially linked to dementia. See how it works? There are studies in animals showing chronic EMF exposure may impact memory or hippocampal function. So, well, there was one study, the male spag dolly rats were exposed to that cell phone stuff for 1 hour a day throughout their adolescence, okay? 1 hour a day, they put these rats next to a cell phone. The findings, at 60 days, exposed rats showed pyramidal neuron loss oxidative stress, and hippocampus damage, suggesting impaired memory potential. So yeah, they put a phone next to those rats and found out they got a problem, right? There was another one. It was the ELF, EMF, and spatial memory in adult rats. Rats were exposed to extremely low frequency EMF for 2 hours daily for over 60 days. Exposure altered behavior, impacted spatial memory. Yeah, spatial memory, because that's what I'm getting with my hands. I can't see, I can't chop a carrot without flinging it all over the sink. So I think that's my spatial memory. So spatial memory retention and anxiety responses also elevated oxidative stress markers in the brain. There was another one, a chronic EMF in mice. 6 mice received the EMF 2 hours a day, 5 days a week for 8 months. The mice exhibited impaired spatial and recognition memory, along with gene expression changes in the hippocampus linked to neurogenesis. And they did a EMF and radial arm maze in rats. Rats were exposed 6 hours a day, 5 days a week for 10 weeks at 916 megahertz. Findings mid-study, weeks 4 to 5. Exposed rats had slower maze completion, more errors, and abnormal hippocampus neuron findings. Firing through some adaptation occurred later. There was another EMF and kindling stress in rats. Rats with hippocampus kindling seizure as a seizure model exposed to EMF for 1 hour a day over 1 week. These EMF restored learning and memory in kindled rats and normalized, I don't know what this is saying, but anyway, so here's another one. EMF in mice. Mice exposed to simulated 5G frequencies 4 hours a day for 28 days. EMF exposure led to anxiety-like behaviors, reduced hippocampus BDNF expression, indicating stress effects. Another one they did with the rats, and they exposed it to, let me see here, exposure for 60 days. EMF improves spatial memory. Yeah, I'm not following what that means. But anyways, I have all of these studies down below. It looks to me, they say that consistency is mixed. Some exposures cause hippocampal damage and cognitive decline, especially with RF-EMF in healthy animals. Other exposures, like low-frequency EMF in disease models, can be beneficial. Mechanisms involve oxidative stress, neuron damage, altered firing. Yeah, okay, so relevance to humans remains uncertain due to differences in species, well, of course, exposure levels, of course, duration, and modulated circumstances. So, well, yeah, relevance to humans compared to what it's doing to the rats is they don't know. Well, because they haven't done anything about it, right? That's exactly how this works. So what I'm going to be doing is next I will be talking about what drugs these people are all on. You keep hearing words like ketamine and all this stuff going on, and you think, how are these people even in their right minds? Well, I don't think they are in their right minds. Oh, here's the part about the doctors. As the oldest baby boomers turn 80 this year, the medical industry is already overtaxed in its ability to provide dementia care, let alone handle the expected barrage of cases in the future. It's a dire situation. It's already at emergency levels to get a diagnosis, to get care, and all the points along the way. As the baby boomers age, the disconnect between supply and demand is growing larger. So I wonder why that is. The lifetime risk of dementia after age 55 is about 42%, according to a recent study published in the journal Nature Medicine. Around 1 million adults in the U.S. are projected to develop dementia each year by 2060, compared with around 514,000 in 2020, the study found. More than 6 million Americans currently have Alzheimer's, or so they think, right? The current benchmark for adequate levels of care is 10 neurologists for every 10,000 people with dementia, according to the Alzheimer's Association. 20 states have fewer than that, making them dementia neurological deserts. Just like we have food deserts where people can't find food in this country, we now have dementia neurology deserts. The gulf between the haves and the have-nots will only get worse. About 92% of all patients with mild cognitive impairment go undiagnosed, according to a 2023 study. It's shocking how much care is needed and the gaps in care that we currently have. Well, yeah, it is pretty shocking, right? Kind of on purpose, though, right? And they're always talking about drug testing welfare recipients, right? So before I start talking about what drugs these people are all on, well, they're trying to introduce a bill introduced on January the 13th, 2025. It targets applications for the temporary assistance for needy families. It also for the food program called SNAP. The requirements: applicants with a prior drug-related offense within the last 5 years must undergo drug testing. Those without such a history are also subject to a substance abuse screening. Positive test results lead to a 1-year benefits denial. In other words, if you smoked a joint, one marijuana cigarette, you're going to get denied for an entire year, unless the individual completes a treatment program or tests negatively for this substance, right? States failing to implement these provisions may face reduced federal funding for these programs. You need to understand that a lot of these states are too poor to pay for their own people's health and food benefits, the SNAP and the health. So the federal government pays for them. So now the federal government, you meaning the people in charge, meaning Donald Trump and them, can make these laws. So if you want federal money, you got to take these drug tests, right? And they're doing one in San Francisco. The mayor of San Francisco in 2024, they mandate drug testing for recipients of the County Adult Assistance Program. Those testing positive must enroll in a free treatment program to continue receiving benefits. Implementation set to begin on January 1, 2025, following voter approval in March of 2024. They always want you to agree and to approve what they're doing. Stop committing to them and stop agreeing with what they're doing is a simple answer. A 2024 survey indicates that 76% of Americans support laws requiring drug screening and treatment for welfare recipients suspected of substance abuse to continue receiving benefits. This support spans across political affiliations, with 84% of Republicans, 69% of Democrats, and 75% of independents in favor. Critics argue that drug testing for welfare recipients may not be cost effective. A 1996 study cited by the Center for Law and Social Policy found that the cost of identifying a single substance abuser through testing could range from $20,000 to $77,000, suggesting that the benefits may not justify the expense. And what I'd like to say about this is they're all going for mandatory testing, right? Well, who is testing the people in charge? The people in charge, Donald Trump and his whole gang, Joe Rogan and all these people, they are all massively taking a lot of drugs themselves. So who is testing all of them? Oh, nobody, you say? Well, yeah, that's kind of the problem, right? Let me put this on hold. And when I come back, I'll be getting into what they're talking about because I have kind of a problem with testing poor people to give them food and not testing people in charge of the money to distribute to those poor people, right? This was taxpayer dollars. The taxpayers paid for this money, not the people in charge. They're in effect deciding that they're not going to give funding to people who they consider might have smoked a little weed or done this or that. But let's take a closer look at the psychology of the people that are actually in charge. What does ketamine mean? What does it mean that they're all taking testosterone, all of these drugs? Well, what it means is rocky roads ahead. But let me come back with all the drugs that they're on. See how it works is what they want for us, they don't want for themselves, right? That is a true definition of a psychopath. They want to dish out what we should be doing, while all along they themselves are creating the same thing. A good psychopath and a great psychopath will do this. They will, right from the beginning, accuse you of doing everything that they're actually doing. So they're actually acting like the whole American public, nothing but a bunch of drug addicts, right? Well, if we're all a bunch of drug addicts, let's take a closer look at the drug addicts that are in charge of this rocky ship right now. Okay, let's take a look at the elites. Remember, elites is their name. EL, that comes from Saturn, also known as Satan. Joe Rogan, their favorite guy, he said he isn't drinking and he's going to church. Trump seems to have a catheter running up his leg. Recent photos have exposed that Trump has what appears to be a catheter traveling up his leg. People also claim that Trump wears diapers because of his out of control bowel movements from all the years of Adderall, the stuff that makes you go poop. The reason people have extensive bowel problems, and don't mean to be gross, but here's what they do. If they're using Adderall and whatnot, it activates the colon, okay? But if they're using cocaine, you have other symptoms because a lot of cocaine is actually cut with baby laxatives. So yes, people taking a lot of cocaine and those things will have out of control bowel issues. Yeah, so they have bowel issues. So it's not surprising that Trump is possibly wearing diapers, right? Because you lose control of your bowels. So that's how that works. So let me see here. Okay, this is really good. I just lost my place here. Hold on a second here. Somehow they have Joe Rogan and all those losers as being like the model for men to be around. Yeah, let's go listen to Joe Rogan and his friends talk about getting drunk and all this other stuff. Yeah, so now Joe Rogan, I also do not believe that all the money they claim that he's earning, I think that that is all smoke and mirrors, but not my point for today. But let's talk about Joe Rogan first and his alcohol. In April to May of 2025, Joe Rogan announced he's been sober for about 2 months, saying quitting alcohol made him feel dumb that he didn't do it sooner. He joked on the Joe Rogan Experience that the days after drinking were just too rough and he doesn't miss the negative effects. He also mentioned attending church more frequently, though details on frequency or his personal reflections are sparse. So he's talking about going to church. Who else is going to church? Well, Russell Brand started going to church when he knew sexual assault charges were coming his way. So is this the case? I don't know. Joe Rogan also regularly shares that he used a hot-cold cycle routine, alternating between a sauna and cold plunges. So he says that he does these to improve his health, but yeah, nobody has actually ever done any research or any of these things any good. So Joe Rogan also talks a lot about increasing testosterone and saying that that can happen with these cold plunges. But Rogan has also admitted, no one had to search through these people's medicine cabinets, okay? They admit this stuff openly, okay? Just like RFK Jr. has admitted his testosterone use. They all admit these things, right? So this is all public information. Rogan has admitted to using testosterone replacement therapy, or TRT, and possibly human growth hormone, or HGH. Yes, I have seen shows of them when the Rogan and his fake, all those people he calls comedians, who none of them are funny, they sit around and they hire nurses to come and give them all IV treatments. I'm not clear what all the IV treatments are because I'm not going to spend that much time on these people. But yeah, they like to sit around and get IV treatments for some strange reason. So he talks about on his podcast about he boosts his testosterone through the roof by doing these things. Well, where is he getting that from? Well, he just pulls it out of the air, right? So, so there we've got Joe Rogan, and there was a 2019 randomized study of resistance training men found that 15 minutes of cold water immersion blunted the typical testosterone surge. So, levels were about 9% higher in the non-cold group at 30 minutes post-exercise and dropped below baseline in the cold group by 60 minutes. So, yeah. A 1991 study showed cold exposure caused a 10% drop in testosterone during cold water stimulation. So, yeah, basically, these people are there. They call themselves influencers or podcasters or whatever they call themselves. They really are nothing but bottom of the barrel psychopath sales agents, right? Selling everything they can get their hands on. Joe Rogan has millions and millions of advertising deals. But if you say one bad word about Joe Rogan on your podcast, they will move in and shut you down. So anyway, so they did find that cold exposure does not consistently increase testosterone and may even suppress it. So see, they're always giving you bad advice, right? So it says that cold exposure triggers a sympathetic flight or fight response, sharply increasing this other norepinephrine, but often releasing endorphins for an acute energizing effect. So studies show cortisol levels stay flat or decrease during and out. So yeah, everything that they say is just a bunch of garbage, right? And it took me 2 minutes to pull up some studies. I went over to ChatGPT and I said, show me some studies about this cold plunging that Joe Rogan is talking about. And within a couple of minutes, I have this. He's obviously giving you the wrong advice. Going in that cold water and buying that cold plunge, they actually sell those at Costco now, is going to lower your testosterone. That's because people like Joe Rogan, I don't even know that he is really a man per se, right? They're always in there trying to tell real men how to behave when really, I mean, he's a small, tiny little woman is how it appears to me. So, yeah, it says cold plunges trigger a potent acute hormonal response. So yeah, not good, right? Not good. So it's not a proven endpoint for hormone optimization. Yeah, so they just make stuff up. They sit around. He brings in all of these so-called experts, these Egyptian people and stuff. He really is an agent for the agents, right? Because most all of the people on his show are agents like he is, right? They're all telling the same story. He has all these Egyptians on there with all their fake all of them are fake. They're just there to repeat lies about history, right? So let's talk about ketamine. I really kind of wish I tried ketamine, but I'm not going to try it, so don't worry. So ketamine really affects their perception. It's used as a disassociation, and that is exactly what we don't need are more disassociated people. Do you realize that all of the people that you see on the main screen, if you're on the screen, you're likely on the team, right? All of those people have gone through the brutal training that they go through as children to split the mind to create them into being psychopaths. So it seems pretty odd that the last thing that people who are already well trained in disassociation are attracted to drugs that disassociate them furthermore, because ketamine is classified as a dissociative anesthetic. It creates a sense of detachment from the body, mind, and environment. Isn't that great that people in charge are taking this stuff? People may feel like, oh, hold on a second. So, second here. Okay, people may feel like they are observing themselves from outside their body, an out-of-body experience, or that time and space are distorted. Ketamine can numb emotional responses and temporarily blunt feelings of anxiety or depression. Some users experience a sense of being cut off from their thoughts or surroundings. This effect is one reason ketamine is being explored as a treatment for depression, as it can interrupt rigid negative thought patterns. The K-hole experience. At high doses, ketamine can induce a very deep dissociative state, often referred to as the K-hole. This state involves near total disconnect from sensory input. Ooh, it's sounding better and better. Personal identity, and in some cases, reality itself. The experience can feel profound, terrifying, or euphoric, depending on the setting's dosage and the individual's mental state. In controlled medical environments, small doses of ketamine are used for a variety of purposes. These include anesthesia, pain relief, and more recently, the rapid alleviation of symptoms in individuals with treatment-resistant depression. While the disconnection effect of ketamine can be therapeutic in a medical context, recreation or unsupervised use carries risk. Do tell more. These include confusion, panic attacks, or bad trips, memory problems, and an increased likelihood of accidents or injury due to impaired coordination and awareness. Public awareness and public figures using ketamine. Elon Musk has publicly acknowledged using ketamine, stating that it helps with his depression and enhances his productivity. He discussed this on X, formerly Twitter, and it was later confirmed in reports by media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. What about Peter Thiel? There is no confirmed public admission or verified report that Peter Thiel takes ketamine. However, and I'll be getting back to a whole lot more about Peter Thiel soon here, but not today. Peter Thiel has a long-standing interest in life extension, transhumanism, and experimental medicine, including funding anti-aging research, supporting companies involved in psionics, parabolas, young blood plasma infusions, and nootropics. So, yeah, Peter Thiel has funded a company that you can buy young blood from. Yes, Peter Thiel is quite a person, but can't go there today. So, because of this, some speculate that Thiel might be open to substances like ketamine as part of cutting-edge therapies, but there is no credible source confirming that Peter Thiel uses ketamine. So who are some of the public figures linked to ketamine? Well, Elon Musk is a confirmed user. Elon Musk has openly discussed his use of ketamine to treat depression. He has emphasized its positive effects on both mood and productivity. Musk has suggested that while some people benefit from SSRIs, for him, ketamine works better. Actress Kristen Bell. She's a supporter of psychedelic-assisted therapy. While Kristen Bell has not publicly endorsed ketamine specifically, she has been open about her mental health struggles and has been voiced support for psychedelic research in general. Aaron Rodgers, that baseball guy, NFL quarterbacker Aaron Rodgers has spoken about his use of ayahuasca, a DMT-based psychedelic. Gwyneth Paltrow, supporter of psychedelic therapy. Yeah. Gwyneth Paltrow has featured content on ketamine-assisted therapy and broader psychedelic awareness practices. Her involvement has helped bring attention to these topics in mainstream wellness discussion. Yes, we're in a copycat era, right? Oh, all these celebrities are taking it, so maybe you and your kids should take it too. Bad idea. Dr. John Crystal, leading medical expert. Dr. John Crystal, that's Krystal, leading medical expert, a psychiatrist at Yale University. Dr. John Crystal is one of the earliest researchers to explore ketamine's use as a treatment for depression. His clinical work has been instrumental in legitimizing ketamine as a fast-acting antidepressant within the medical community. Dr. Carl Hart, public advocate for rational drug policy, as a neuropsychopharmacologist at Columbia University, Dr. Carl Hart advocates for science-based, responsible discussion and policy regarding psychoactive substances. He supports research and adult use of ketamine in appropriate contexts, emphasizing informed, rational approaches to drug use. Well, tech and venture capital circles, while not all have admitted ketamine use, many in Silicon Valley are deeply involved in psychedelic research and funding, such as Peter Thiel, co-founder of Palantir, an early investor in Facebook. MDMA. Thiel is also a proponent of radical medical innovation, life extension, and anti-aging science. And of course, we have the VA. What they do is they come out and they say, yeah, ketamine's pretty good. Let's everybody take it. And then what they do is they pass laws and stuff, right? So they probably pass some deals at the VA saying, oh, we're going to have so much money available to research ketamine on the soldiers. See how much they love the troops, right? They talk about don't spit on the troops, right? Or we're going to get you. But yet they're willing to give them all these dangerous things as tests, right? Oh, because they care, right? So the VA, the Veterans Association, is actively using ketamine-based therapies, including the FDA-approved nasal spray. It's called Spravato, and off-label IV or IM ketamine infusions to treat veterans with treatment-resistant depression and suicidal ideation. And this Spravato via nasal spray, since around 2019, the VA has offered esketamine under a restricted protocol for veterans who haven't improved after trying at least 2 antidepressants. So if the pills aren't making you worse, oh, wait a minute, better, we'll give you this, right? Numerous, get this, VA facilities have permanently added IV or IM ketamine protocols since about 2022. So now they have set up actually places within VA people to shoot these vets up with ketamine. For example, the Philadelphia VA's neuromodulation clinic offers both TMS and ketamine, while some sales are alone. As of 2023, get this, roughly 75% of VA facilities, that's 105 out of 139, delivered either IV ketamine or the nasal stuff, serving over 1,800 veterans. In VA sites like Ann Arbor, they found that nearly 50% of veterans reported a substantial drop in depression scores within 6 weeks of IV. Yeah, I don't believe any of this stuff. So Yeah, unfortunately, they're selling it now to the veterans, just like they sell, they allow for high risk loans to be right outside of military bases. Um, Military bases are being used to run drugs and people. I mean, people in the military, I think, have enough problems, right? So, yeah, so ketamine is being pushed on the vets. What could possibly go wrong, right? Just like what was that? I did a show a year or two ago about how they all those burn pits, getting all the vets sick with all those burn pits, and how they also did that crazy thing where they gave them hot sodas. Yeah, they left the sodas out in the sun knowing that it was going to lead to brain cancer. So, yeah, when they talk about don't spit on the military, I think these people are the ones spitting on the military, and I'll have more about this down the road here, so I don't want to get too wrapped up in right this second. But so ketamine is a Schedule III controlled substance in the U.S. Some users develop psychological dependence. Yeah, probably happens, right? Chronic misuse can cause ketamine bladder syndrome. Okay, that's why they're peeing all over themselves, right? uh, Musk was talking about he couldn't urinate or something like that. So chronic misuse can cause ketamine bladder syndrome, leading to pain, incontinence, and potential long-term damage. Risk of psychosis. Oh, this is looking even better. Or worsening anxiety in vulnerable individuals, people with schizophrenia or bipolar. Just makes them worse. The benefit, they say, it rapidly gives you relief from suicidal ideation, often within hours, but it gives you disassociation, elevated blood pressure, and nausea. Doesn't sound too good. Um, it gives significant improvement in treatment resistance depression, but the risk of addiction, tolerance, and long-term use. Ketamine can work with SSRIs and therapy, requires close supervision and sometimes multiple sessions. Yeah, sounds like too much work. So they say that the VA is managing these symptoms well with pre-screening for cardiac, monitoring 2 hours post-dose, and controlled dosing schedules. Yeah, until they starting run amok and giving it all out, right? So anyway, so that's all down below as far as they're spreading the joy to the military. I guess they just want to get them killed off fast as they want to kill off the rest of us, right? I was cruising around the other day over on BitChute and Rumble, which I'll be getting way, way more into Rumble when I come back with Peter Thiel. But everybody is now selling those ivermectin pills. I did a show about that. Ivermectin is what they're all pushing, right? We love ivermectin. Well, it's the best way to destroy your DNA. So go listen to that show that I did about it before you start jumping on that bandwagon. I would try to stop jumping on bandwagons. And the reason I'm sharing more work is because I want people to also understand it yourself. That's why I've made available all of my files down below so you can also have access to all of these studies and everything that I'm talking about today, because I don't want to just give you just some random links. I want to show you all of the places that I wandered through to figure this stuff out. And believe me, I have wandered through a lot of information. So let me tell you what I have down below here for you. Okay, down below, I have just about everything you ever want to figure out about this stuff. I have all the details. Some of the things I put the studies next to them. I've explained to you how all the dementia cases, why it can rise to 42%. I explained the different studies that I talked about just here, so you can take another look at them. It's pretty obvious what's happened here. It is about omission, right? They just did not happen to do these studies in adults. That's really it's really as simple as that, right? I don't see it as any more complicated, but I have a ton of data. I mean, a ton of data for you to take a look at. And please explore these links on your own. If we don't understand what happens here and how evil has really taken over our world, we're doomed to have it happen all over again, right? Because most people have a great deal of difficulty with the level of evil we're dealing with right now. And I got to tell you, it is on purpose. They hid the diagnosis of what a psychopath is as an example, right? So now they want to hide this thing about how these tests were never done on any actual humans in these houses, right? That we're all sitting in. So now they obviously, with very little research and stuff, they want to push off this ketamine deal. Hey, it's good for everybody. Well, I think it's because they likely have a pile of money at the VA hospital that they've all latched onto. So that is the kind of the drug world that these people are all living in. And I would like to note that most of them, remember, it doesn't just happen to old people, but look at Joe Biden. He obviously, I mean, I am not going to try to be a diagnostic doctor or something, but he obviously had some sort of memory problems, right? Whether you want to call it Alzheimer's or something vague like dementia, right? But I think it's important that we also start using the right words. What we're looking at is Alzheimer's disease created completely in our homes by what they're pumping in. And I'll give you a couple of quotes here. This is a quote that somebody said. These are two this was about the fight between Elon Musk and Trump. How much of this fight is real and how much is staged? I really do not know, but I think some of it is real. And I'll read this quote. These are two man-child fighting in the schoolyard over control of the jungle gym to the cheers and derision of their respective supporters and amused spectators. It speaks volumes of the personas and mentality of those who vote for, support, and idolize such public and political icons. America has become the very definition of a dysfunctional and stupid society. Since Sniffy Don is also a big drug user, of course, he would eliminate the testing. And let's not pretend he only uses Adderall. There's all sorts of chemicals swimming around in that mush brain of his. And why are they talking about the testing? Well, because ever since they got into the White House, they stopped drug testing themselves, but yet they want to drug test us, right? Established in the 1980s under the Reagan administration as part of the broader war on drugs. And I will be back with all the deal of how they ruined the entire Black community during that time, that war on drugs and Gary Webb, that will come down the road here. So employees in national security or sensitive roles were often subject to random drug screening. The policy became formalized under Executive Order 1264 in 1986, which declared that the federal government is a drug-free workplace. White House staffers under this, especially those with security clearance, could be subject to random drug testing, pre-employment screening, testing after an incident or suspicion. Did Donald Trump eliminate drug testing at the White House? There's no public executive order or documented memo officially canceling the drug testing policy. However, news reports and whistleblower claims, particularly in 2020, allege that Trump's administration dramatically reduced or ignored enforcement of drug screening rules for staff and appointees. Example, in 2020, media outlets like Axios and Politico reported that White House staff were not undergoing routine drug screening, raising eyebrows, especially during the COVID era. There's no official confirmation that Trump ended the testing, but it appears that Trump has never admitted to using Adderall, stimulants, or any illicit drugs. But we have Elon Musk admitted in 2023 to using prescribed ketamine. We have RFK Jr. RFK Jr. has spoken about testosterone replacement therapy. That's why his skin looks like rawhide from a beaten cow. That's why his skin looks so thick and creepy looking, because of all the testosterone. And said RFK Jr. has spoken about testosterone replacement therapy. He reportedly used it to restore energy levels after health issues. Testosterone therapy is legal with a prescription, but excessive or off-label use can be controversial. Joe Rogan has openly discussed using testosterone, HGH, and peptides. He said he uses it as part of his longevity and performance. This use is not illegal. So, anyway, drug use in high places, rumored Adderall, ketamine prescribed, testosterone. So they've admitted to the ketamine and the testosterone, right? And now they're pushing to try to drug test people who have every right to need food and supplies for their children, right? These same people that scream how much they love the children are into all these drugs themselves. Silicon Valley's use of microdosing psychedelics and bioidentical hormones is openly discussed in private networks. Podcaster culture like Rogan, RFK Jr., and that Huberman has normalized testosterone and these other topics. So, yeah, I think what they're doing, Rogan and JFK and them, RFK and them, is they are trying to get people to join in, right? There's this person called Brian Johnson. He's into all this stuff. I have all this stuff down below. But they are really into all of this stuff. And funnily, not many of them seem to be into sleep, right? And decent food. So I think we're in for a fairly rocky road ahead because the elites use a lot of pharmacology. I mean, right here in the United States, and I'll have more about these longevity clinics when I get back to Teal, but they're coming up with all these longevity clinics that pump people full of drugs and stuff for thousands of dollars per year. I'm not really sure who's going to be using all these clinics when most of us are not able to function for food and stuff, let alone going to expensive clinics. But yeah, the focus seems to be on luxury housing, luxury all this. So yeah, I have a full list of where all the clinics are down below if you're interested in joining any of them. I imagine people in these clinics all wear white coats and stuff, right? They probably have those snakes on their logos. Hey, they're telling us who they are. They have two snakes right there on their logo, and right there they're saying, hey, take this ketamine, it's good for you. Everything they're telling us should be looked at with a high level of suspicion, right? I'll be back with much, much more. I have a case of omission that will just knock your hair back. Be safe out there, and goodbye for now.